O'clock. Let's call the meeting to order and start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and
Mr. Oliver,
Here.
Ms. Curry. Here. Mr. Whitmore,
Here.
Mr. Voss.
Here.
Mr. Mount,
here.
Mr. Granger.
Here.
Mr. Downey,
Present.
Mr. Hart.
Here. Okay. Motion to approve the agenda. Or any revisions? or anything?
Yes. I got one. Minor item, action item C, spaceport name change recommendations. It says here that Mr. Whitmore stated that it would be best not to use the name of our neighbors. And that's true. I don't think we should call ourselves Community Space Center, but what I was actually getting at was not to use the end word, the suffix, if you will, and not use center, station, facility, or complex. And the way it's written, it just reads kind of funny and people might think.
You're talking about the minutes?
Yes, I am.
We're not there yet.
Never mind.
I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Oh.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it. That's right.
About spring
It's
loaded.
all good. It's all
Not really.
No, you're next. So,
good. Wait for it.
we're having any other comments? I'll call vote. All those in favor say aye. Motion carries. Item E, approval of the minutes from March 17th, 2022. Are there any corrections or a motion to approve?
What I said before.
You start again?
Sure.
Which?
Action items, item C, spaceport name change recommendations, that's page 3. Page 3 of the minutes.
Last page.
Action items, page 3, spaceport name change recommendations. And the third one down says, Mr. Whitmore stated it'd be best not to use the name of our neighbors. Absolutely a true statement. What I really was trying to get to was not to use the end words, the suffixes, if you will, of center, station, facility, and complex, because those are already in use. And we want to differentiate to not have confusion within the existing operations. Thank you very much.
Are you sure that's an accurate recall?
I'm sorry.
You sure that's an accurate recall?
It's the best I can figure. Judge for yourself.
So is that, who's gonna suggest it?
We'll make the changes.
Just end items or something.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you.
So, are there any other items that need to be addressed? Motion.
Motion to approve with this change.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Sure. Now we're down to item F, which is action items. Memorandum of understanding between the Airport Authority and Alliance Capital Management Group LLC for the corporate.
Mr. Chair, before we get into that, can we have Christy Kennard come up and introduce our new staff?
Is that on the agenda?
No.
Just take a second.
All right, come on up.
For the record, my name is Christina Kennard, and I would like to introduce 2 new staff members that we have. We have Stina Beheim. She is our new finance specialist. And then we have Antigua Daniels. She's our administrative assistant, and she will be helping out here 2 days a week, as well as working at airport storage Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So who's gonna do the minutes?
Sue.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so now back to action item 1, memorandum of understanding between the Airport Authority and Alliance Capital Management Group LLC for a corporate hangar development and the Space Coast region. Kevin.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've been working with Alliance Capital Management for the last 6 months. They have identified an area on the west side. They would like to construct 3 to 6 large corporate hangars for kind of large aircraft storage. As part of their portfolio, they do build to suit and leaseback projects. They've done industrial, commercial, retail projects. They're interested in crossing over into airport land. The scope of the MOU basically allows Alliance Capital Management, along with their development partner, which is Embry Group, to do due diligence on Area 1, which is identified within your exhibit. Their due diligence is basically their architecture and engineer costs, their construction costs, utility investigation. They want to know what's over there, sanitary, sewer, water, and whatnot. The actual size of the hangars that they possibly could construct, and then also marketing for letters of interest. And then there's some basic terms within the MOU. It's a 6-month due diligence period. We will investigate if there's any potential for FAA or FDOT funding for a common use ramp over there. It's a non-binding document. Our attorney agrees with kind of the MOU style of doing this, and we're recommending approval. May answer any questions.
So it'll be a land lease today.
Yes, sir.
And will we be obligated to any infrastructure?
Not with this MOU. The only thing that we talked about was we would search out to see if there's any sort of grant funding for it. And I don't know if we're going to be successful. This is really just a due diligence on this part. On their part, this allows them to go ahead and kind of market the area and then come back within 6 months and see if they want to move forward. I think it's a good idea versus doing these ground leases that may not come to fruition.
I move to approve.
Any other discussion?
Good idea, like I said, instead of getting tied up over the ground.
Do we have an amount agreed to?
It's just a basic due diligence period. That's all it is.
Well, then I guess I'll call a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, action item 2. Airport Spaceport Master Plan request for qualification results. And
Good. I'd like to bring up Dr. Dave Byers, do an overview of the Airport Spaceport Master Plan RFQ and the selection committee results. Dr. Byers has promised to be brief. We did retain his services for putting together the RFQ and the statement of qualifications. He also facilitated the selection committee for us. So,
Thank you, and good afternoon. This has been an ongoing process for the last 2 months, trying to do a qualifications-based selection for a consulting firm to do essentially 3 master plan updates and the spaceport master plan, which is co-located with Space Coast Regional. So we put the advertisements out. We also sent invitations out to consultants that are in the business of doing master plans. We had a period where they could ask questions if they didn't understand the request for qualifications. We essentially got 2 out of that during that period of about 2.5 weeks. And then we closed it out and received 5 submittals, which all were just really well put together. To help with the process of reviewing each of the submittals, we had convened a selection committee. You'll see the names in the handout. Who spent? We actually had 3 separate meetings. We had the first. We sent them copies of the submittal. We had an evaluation sheet that helped guide them on what we had told the consultants we were going to, what the basis was for what we wanted to see in their submittals. Those were also weighted to help them understand what was most important to focus on. So the selection committee went through each one of these and they provided their ranking. We had a meeting that had the preliminary ranking, which you see in the agenda package. But there were a couple of committee members wanted to hear from the project managers. So we elected to postpone the final recommendation on the rankings until we had a chance to meet up and interview the project managers, which happened this morning. At the same time, we allowed the committee members to change their scores if they felt compelled to. And after we received those back, the rankings had actually changed. The number one ranked firm, Recondo, they were far and above the others that were also looked at. But number two and number three were really close, and I think that was the concern was if the negotiations with number one fail, we automatically go to the number two selection. So they wanted to be sure, just because the scores were close, that is this the way they want to rank them. So, and that did change. So what you see now are the final rankings from the selection committee. They voted unanimously to provide that recommendation to you. And at this point, we need to go forward with negotiating a contract with the top ranked firm. But before we can do that, we'll get their scope, but we actually, because of the what we anticipate the cost of the project to be, we have to go out and get an independent fee estimate. So somebody independent of all this whole process will actually take a look at the work that is being proposed, and they'll give us an estimate of what they think the fee should be before we even get to see the consultant's fee proposal, so that we have a basis to negotiate. And that's a federal requirement. So everything we've been doing has been trying to meet all those criteria that the FAA requires. So I'm open for questions. If you want to see copies of the submittals, we have some in the back.
We have a lot.
A lot of them.
They basically all got turned back in today.
But the selection committee did put a lot of time. So, just reading through these, and it was pretty clear that because of the questions today, and also with their rankings, that they spent a lot of time reviewing.
It was very thorough.
So, Kevin,
Yes, sir.
what do you need from us?
We need your recommendation to move forward with the selection committee's ranking, which ranked Recondo as number one. And then we need another motion authorizing staff to negotiate with number one, which is Recondo.
Okay, so we need a motion to accept recommendation from staff for us to enter into negotiations with Recondo. Correct?
Recommendation from the selection committee. The table.
So does anybody have any questions?
Sure. First, thank you. Do I understand correctly that time is kind of the essence in moving forward in this process? We can't really understand, we have kind of a limited timeline to get all this stuff, the contract approved and submitted to the FAA. Is that
Correct. There's a very short window. We're trying to get it funded this fiscal year yet. We believe the money's available if we can do the paperwork. So, and I believe we've got about another 3 weeks to submit a grant application to the FAA, which means that we negotiated the contract and we've met all those requirements.
The pre-applications are in the system. Now we submit the grant application, we really start competing with other projects. Because it's a planning project, the earlier you're in the system, the better off you are.
Does it happen? I'm not experienced this at all. Where you enter negotiations with the winner and they don't.
Yeah, those things have happened.
So should we include, if we're gonna approve to the board, that also approve them to reach out to the table? Just to save some time.
Be prudent.
Well, that's what we're doing. So the first motion really is for the board to accept and approve this election committee's rankings and recommendations.
I see.
And by doing so, then you're approving the rankings that, but right, and so that's the way it goes, is you negotiate number one, and if it fails, you automatically move to number two because you've accepted the rankings as recommended. So we can amend your motion, Mr. Vice Chair, to
With the grants, what's our percentage? 100%?
I think it's gonna be 90% from the FAA, 8% from FDOT, and then the spaceport master plan will be 100% funded by Space Florida.
And I just looked real carefully, but did the committee have a feeling that any one of these companies might not meet their deadlines, or what we do if they don't meet their deadlines?
When you say the deadlines for the
We
negotiation.
said we're gonna set deadlines for them, right? But they have to have this stuff.
Yes, I mean, as far as the work is concerned, I mean, as far as the contract is concerned, as soon as you ratify the selection.
No, I was worried about the work. Well, we agreed to it. Then I just want to make sure that there was some consideration given to this company usually gets their work done on time and this one doesn't, or.
Absolutely, and that was actually one of the things we asked about, and is there a workload? Do you have the horsepower to do all four of these projects?
I so move as described by Vice Chair. To accept the rankings as they are published.
All right, any other discussion? Call a vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then we need to give you authorization to enter into negotiations with Condo Associates. For that.
I move to proceed with negotiations for a contract with the number one. And then as filed, as published rankings at number one.
Thank you. Go second. Yes, sir.
Brad, y'all are in Orlando.
Yes, Mr. Chair, good evening. Orlando, Florida.
Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That's all our work in it. All right, so that takes us to action item 3, which is spaceport name change recommendation.
All right, Mr. Chair, this is just kind of a continuation of our previous discussion. Just in your handouts, we did some conceptual logos, if you will. This is the same group that did the Fly Space Coast logo and the Fly Space Coast website. Just revisiting the exploration space port center. Brad, if there's something happening. This is still one of my recommendations, and exploration to me just says innovation. Space is what we do now, along with aviation. And then to me, the word center, it aligns with Kennedy Space Center. Mr. Craig wanted us to talk about a timeline, some deliverables, if you will. We're looking at, again, these are all kind of moving targets, if you will, 4 different phases. Phase 1 would be like a building phase where we select our name. We come up with an actual logo. Again, these are just conceptuals at this point, just for fun. We build a website, and then we build a press release distribution list. what I found since I've been here is not a lot of people know about our airport, and specifically not a lot of people know anything about our spaceport. So that's our task. Phase 2 is really implementing our plan, developing collateral, again, enhancing our spaceport web page with real estate maps, layouts, and then developing some signage on site as well. And again, ongoing media opportunities. And 3 is investing in that stuff, doing paid advertising, paid collateral, and then and monitoring the metrics, if you will. And then phase 4 would just be kind of evaluating the whole process and kind of making adjustments if need be. So I don't know what y'all think about the name. I know because y'all wanted to kind of think about it and write it down and come back and give me some thoughts.
Brad?
Well, now that you mention it, like I said, I kind of like the idea of differentiation of not using part of another name because people are going to be saying shortcuts to see at the center, that kind of thing. Just keep it clear in people's heads that we're something different. Bringing exploration in, it's a marketing name that's known in the area. That's probably not a bad idea. I still like. I kind of prefer spaceport over space center, just because of that differentiation matter. I like the ring of Space Coast Spaceport, but that's just one person. And that was even a secondary choice, but my primary got shot down. So.
All right.
It's worth.
No comments this time.
As you all know, I love the idea of using the word exploration because it's limitless. And as we see more space companies move this way, I think it doesn't tie us to any specific thing, right? I personally like the idea of spaceport because of its denotation and such, and center, maybe because I am an NASA employee, I think center implies this a lot more than what I think our vision is at this point. So in any case, I would propose to the board exploration spaceport. Just my 2 cents.
I like it.
No.
I also like spaceport, but if you can figure out maybe a central port or something that tells everybody where we really are.
Well, I think exploration does. This exploration part is synonymous with this area. And again, there's a marketing move to really encapsulate that across the river here. So,
Can you expound on that any? The marketing move?
Space Coast EDC, the zone, they're all trying to tie exploration park on this side of the river because of it's really internationally known. And I just think it we would be known if we tie that name into this.
That's a great point. Internationally known is a big item according to some of our tenants.
Yeah.
So that checks that box.
Space perspective, did they have any additional?
No, I think they like it. They were hung up on the Canaveral name for a while, but I think we got away from that, rightfully so. So I think they like the exploration. They like Space Center, but again, I can certainly, it's all about compromise.
I agree with
Space
Brad.
Force. I agree with Brad.
Did you say, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
did you say that you have the domain names already secured for?
Yeah,
every
Justin's kid locked them all down for us.
I apologize, I know Mark was about to.
No, URL.
We had to get them before Mark got them. And sold it back to us.
I've made it known before. I like Spaceport, Florida. I think it's somewhere in being quick. And I like the idea of maybe an exploration center at Spaceport, Florida. But I just think Spaceport, Florida, thank God Cecil Field didn't take it. And it's there for the taking. And you talked about an international recognition, Spaceport, Florida. But I'm not gonna, all these sound good to me. These look good, but that's since we're not telling our preferences.
We need to make a decision, right?
Ideally,
But he preferred if we could make a decision. So I like the idea of including Flores.
guess they get
Get them in the
Spaceport,
right
Florida.
hemisphere.
But that's what I think. I think it's a simple, quick Spaceport, Florida. And if you want to add Exploration Center at Spaceport, Florida, you could.
Doesn't fit on
That's a big marketing angle. Florida's wider recognition than,
but it doesn't really define the area.
right?
Does Exploration Space Center define it any more than Spaceport, Florida?
Well, I think they want to say Central Florida. I mean, the name gets so long that,
I can live with that.
does anybody want to make a motion?
Here from our chairman.
I think,
Oh, John? John? Can you hear us? John, we can't hear you. It's.
Can you hear me or no?
There you
yes,
go.
You can't hear me?
Go ahead and try.
I think the exploration, when we went the direction of not splitting the space, the direction of keeping the airport name and kind of going with a global fly space coast, which I think really looks good. And I think it's a really good idea. I think it kind of lends itself to having being able to tie it into something like exploration, simply for the fact that it's not going to be known on its own as a spaceport. It is part of the whole Fly Space Coast brand, if you will, which includes the 3 airports and the spaceport. And so it's not standing on its own. It's always going to be incorporated as part of the umbrella of Fly Space Coast, since we decided to keep the airport's name the way it is. So I think the exploration really goes well. The only question I have is if we have, and I can't remember if we had this discussion, or if Adam has already gone down this road, if we've talked with both the EDC and with Space Florida to make sure that we're all in concert, that exploration is that we're piggybacking basically on a name that's already out there, which is fine, Exploration Park, and I think it ties in well. But I want to make sure that we're in concert with them, that they know what we're doing, that we know what they're doing, and that we're all kind of marching down the same path. So I'd like to see us, if we're going to go that way, direction to both Adam and Kevin to make sure that we have touched base with all those folks that are involved with Exploration Park, and that they understand what we're doing, so that we can kind of figure out maybe how we might be able to market it together, what benefits might come from that from both sides. I just think that's worth a discussion going forward, for us to give direction for them to do that. That's all.
Have meet regularly with Space Florida and Space Coast EDC. I have mentioned that on numerous occasions to them, casually in meetings. No one has ever brought up any issues. Maybe we should bring it up formally to them and see what's what. Sure.
And that's fine, Kevin. That's great, Kevin. I think we need to take it a step further now, because this is a big step from a marketing standpoint, and I think we need to have those discussions out front so that we understand what we're getting into and what we kind of lay the groundwork for that partnership, right? And how we can leverage what has already been done. Seeing as we don't have a huge marketing budget, I think it's in our best interest to really try and figure out how we can leverage the marketing that's already been done, and what we need to do, what we can do, from another standpoint, to make the entire package marketable. That's kind of all.
Okay, no, great point.
Okay, so one other consideration is that if you take the letters ESP, would be what those letters, is that okay?
That would be if there were 3 words. It's just, I believe spaceport is typically done as 2 as a single word.
Single word, okay.
And you're right. That's typically how it's done.
Correct.
C.
Okay, so somebody want to make a motion then that we proceed with a name?
Did you say you were gonna go to,
Yeah, it sounds like we need to have some further discussion with the EDC and the spaceport, and so perhaps we can bring this back next meeting.
Okay, so you're gonna move forward with going to
We have some direction.
them and check on.
Okay, can I ask what names you're gonna check on progression from the EDC? Will you include all, or
I will include all.
But essentially, we're looking at exploration spaceport.
Yeah. Well-rounded discussion. Open.
Okay, so then we're going to table this to the next, continue,
can't table?
Postpone.
postpone decision to the next. one.
Thank you.
All right, so the next action item is number 4, which is approval of invoices for Avcon and Michael Baker International.
We have 2 invoices for Avcon Engineering. We don't have any invoices for Michael Baker tonight. The first invoice is for Merritt Island, which is the AWAS replacement bidding and construction services. It's request number 1 for $2,745.28. And then the second invoice for Avcon is Arthur Dunn, which is the AWAS replacement bidding and construction services. And that request is for $2,739.98. What's your approval?
move to approve the invoices?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to Deputy Director of Operations and Maintenance report.
Justin Hopman, Deputy Director of Operations and Maintenance. Is this a new title? Congratulations. Thank you.
I'll run through the projects really quick. All of these are legacy projects right now. Runway 927 here at Space Coast is well underway. There was an issue with getting train cars for the aggregate, which put us back about 2 weeks. They're halfway through the runway right now, west of 1836. Paving, it should be done in probably 2 weeks. Which is good.
So the striped and everything.
Yep.
ready to do it.
So they're really doing a jam up job. They're working backwards from the air show date, so.
You want to do the first takeoff and landing? Maybe we
I'll be here.
can. Hangar 52 demo on the west side here at Space Coast. We had some issues with the contractor, so we're evaluating right now the next step forward. We go back to that contractor or seek alternative options. Yes, sir.
Whereabouts on the west side is Hangar 52?
Well, Hangar 52 was just to the south of the Jet Center.
South of Jets.
Yeah, there was a big Army hangar, old, back from the 60s, 70s. It's gone, but there's a lot of drainage work going on back there, and that's
Okay.
the issue.
I think you can still see it on Google Earth because it's usually a couple years behind.
The VAC ramp is moving along. Gopher Tortoise permits are in hand. We have obtained an agreement with FWC, which allows us to move the Gopher Tortoises on site. We move to the approach lighting for 3.6 down to the Malzars. That area is suitable for them. It's way less expensive than going and seeking from other alternative sites right now, and most of them are closed. So we'll have our own relocation site. There's 22 or 23 boroughs that are going to be picked up out of there and moved south. So that should, they're setting up the silt fencing and everything. They were out there yesterday and today. So probably next week we'll start moving tortoises. There's no update on the Willow Creek Connector Road this month. The corporate hangar at Merritt Island, there were some issues with the county. We're going back to them again for permitting and for fire hydrant. The EA is still underway for Merritt Island for the proposed T hangar projects in that area. That'll take another few months. The NASI project, the contractor is finally mobilized. They're put up a temporary fence. There should be some grubbing and some work in the ditches starting this week. We expect that to hopefully move forward quickly so we can expend those grant funds. New projects, we have the AWAS replacement at Arthur Dunn. That's well underway. There's 2 sites that we picked, and I believe they've both been submitted to the FAA for approval. Same with Merritt Island, AWAS underway there. The tower here at Space Coast, the siting study is moving along. We have a meeting next month with the stakeholders with FDOT and FAA to evaluate the 3 sites. 3 sites are over on the west ramp, kind of where Space Coast Jet Center sits, Executive Jet Center.
Would you like to have it?
If I get one spitball in my hair.
The other site is near the approach on 36, and then the final site is just to the east of where the current tower sits across the road.
Will there be any anticipated blind spots on the airport? Tent, about the tent.
No, the new tower will be significantly taller than what we have now. And that's all part of the evaluation process is looking at that. They actually created a 3D model. They put VR goggles on and you can actually pretend you're in the control tower at that elevation and see what you can see.
So they started with 10 sites, now they're down to 3, and then there's like a whole safety risk management panel that goes, it's a whole thing here. So to ensure that there are no blind spots. So many years they built these towers back in the day, and then they found that, well, shoot, we can't see a third of the airport. So that's why we have these now.
One other consideration, if it's down at the end of 36, is that out of harm's way when ILS approach.
Well, this will be the whole thing.
Fuel farm relocation here at Space Coast. That project is underway. We have 3 sites. We narrowed it down to 1 site, which is the first site in front of the existing tower. That is well underway as well. And then the last project we're working on with AvCon is the sign concepts for the entryways for all the airports, new signs to kind of unify everything. But the Merritt Island sign is way different from the Arthur Dunn sign, and then our signs here. So we want to kind of bring everything together.
Will any of the signage be dependent on what we decide here next month?
As far as for the spaceport.
Oh, no, I mean, well, it could be, but it'll be captured within the master plan. But this is really about our new logo and where everything's at right now. And quite honestly, what's out there now is looking quite dated.
You'll have the name of each airport and this new logo for these
Yeah,
new
well,
signs.
AvCon will help us develop some conceptuals, and they have a graphic artist group that they're going to work with. We'll bring everything back to the board for approval. Also.
Would we envision a sign once we decide on the spaceport name?
Yeah, that'll be part of it.
And finally, just an update on the air show. The air show is still on for Saturday, May 21st and 22nd. The runway construction is not expected to be a factor anymore. The Canadian Snowbirds was the headliner. They canceled due to COVID, in trouble with completing the training prior to the season starting. So they canceled their first 6 or 7 shows. And tickets are online at spacecoastairshow.com. the airport authority doesn't really have much to do with it. It's really run by the VAC and their vendor they brought forward to manage the project, manage the event.
Co-host, co-promoter. So who's the headliner?
There'll be F-22 demo team, F-18 Growler team. That's primarily it for jet traffic. It's changing every day. They're moving around and getting more stuff. So we'll have a better idea here in the next 2 weeks.
Well, so really, the trailers, do they park down there, the hump trailers, are they gonna be an issue because I used to use for parking.
Yeah, no, so the parking this year will be all out in that field just to the north of there. There's plenty of room out there. Trailers might be a factor. The truck traffics, we talked to the railroad, they're not operating on Saturday and Sunday, so we don't have to worry about trucks moving around with all the visitors.
Can I just ask how things are going with staffing under you? Are you looking, I know we approved that whole new chain of command and job positions. Is everything well? Are you running it?
Well, yeah, we're doing really good, actually.
Yeah, the only thing that I would like to really look at this fiscal year going into next is definitely a business development position. We really need one, but I think we're all staffed up. I think things are going well with all our staffing. It's not that. Yeah.
I know in the past it was like kind of not talked about.
No.
We're just running on skeleton crew.
No,
We'll never do it.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Let's be Director of Finance and Administration.
Good evening, Christine Horn. Does anyone have any questions on the check register?
Sir, we have an idea what we might have financial.
Yes, sir. We are currently working on, on the engineering and see that we just completed the audit for fiscal year 9/30/21. So we are currently in the process of truing up 9/30/21 in our books, entering, adjusting our entries from the auditors, as well as moving forward. They requested for us to flex the companies to one. So we're in the process. We have to go in the chart accounts and everything. But with that being said, we're hoping to have financial statements to March 31st. By the next board meeting. I stated no later than May 31st, but we're working diligently on that. And okay. That's good. Okay.
Ongoing discussion, Dr. Flynn's agreement.
All right. We are still awaiting official FAA guidance from the airport district office on Dr. Flynn's agreement, but in conversations that we've had or I've had, it appears they're going to consider his usage. Yeah, did we? Yeah, I thought we. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do. We skipped the audit portion on the.
So we went to the check register.
Where's the check
first,
register?
right?
Get the audit and financial statements.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have something you want to convey to us on it?
Well, actually, I would like to introduce Carl Riggs and Ingram, Yvonne Claiborne, as well as David Milton. They were some of the auditors that were assigned to us to complete fiscal year 9/30/21. And she has an audit report to present.
Thank you. Hi, you've all received your copy, electronic and paper, I think at this point. As Christy said, I'm Yvonne Claiborne. I'm the audit partner with Carl Riggs and Ingram in charge of this engagement. And with me today, I have my senior manager, David Milton, who's worked with me on this engagement since we've been with you. This is the audit report for September 30, 2021. The audit opinion, which starts on page 5 of the document, is an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of audit assurance you can get. That says that your financial statements are presented in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The financial statements, management's discussion and analysis provides you, that's management's conversation with you about current year versus prior year. On the current year financial statements, probably of the most significant note is there's $1.3 million sitting in restricted for airport improvements and as part of your equity section. That's related to the prior to fiscal year end, you had voted to sell some land. That's the money or the basis of that land, the cost basis as best we can tell, for that land held for resale. It's in restricted, which was a conservative place to park it because at the time it was unclear whether or not the original land purchases were made with grant dollars or not. And so the most conservative way to hold this while management worked on trying to sort that out with the FAA was to park it in that restricted dollars, just so you know that it, it may be released from restrictions or it may be something that the FAA says we have to deal with it going forward. So that's probably the most significant thing to know. Your change in net position after capital contributions was positive as it was last year. The operating loss is primarily a non-cash loss, but don't forget depreciation is there for you to build your fund balance or your equity section to pay for future improvements. Nothing of huge concern in the notes section. It's all going to be fairly comparable to what you've seen last year. In terms of your operating budget, you don't have a statutory compliance to meet your budgeted appropriations. This is strictly a management tool for you. But again, I think as you go forward and you start to get internal financial statements again, you'll be able to manage your budget better, make amendments as you need. And we should see some movement there. In terms of the compliance section, again, it's an unmodified opinion, but then the findings themselves are all fairly neat. You have some repeat findings, but if you remember, we weren't finished with the audit yet when you had a changeover in personnel last year. You had some vacant positions. So even the recommendations that we made couldn't be implemented at that time because you had turnover. So a lot of the findings have some basis, and you'll see a recurring theme, and the cause is vacant positions, turnover. What happened was that people that were in key roles in your control process weren't there, and those roles weren't redelegated out during that vacancy, and so some things kind of fell off. And mostly it's review and approval of grant reports, getting certain grant reports filed. Another key thing you saw in there is you only had 3 grants that fell under the single audit this year. And for one of those, the authority deviated from their standard operating procedures and didn't use the consultant. In that case, that created a series of findings, same grant and similar process, but because the people that were involved in the review and approval process weren't necessarily the same people that were always reviewed, and things kind of went wrong, went sideways. Nothing serious because the FAA caught it in advance, and that's why you'll see there's no question costs related to some of it. There's some question mark about the certified payrolls because those weren't collected. But it's not a large dollar amount. The FAA is not coming back to my knowledge based on our conversations. The other thing is we talked about capital assets, that land held for resale. That revisited a finding that we had last year. You just don't have a really good inventory of what you own. It doesn't really match the depreciation schedule. We've got like 3 different versions rolling around out there. We're not sure which is the right one. So there was some anecdotal evidence that $1.3 million of that land that was sold was at some point adjusted and brought into your depreciation schedule, but there's no promise of that. So it's shown as a material weakness because there is a potential at some point when you get that straightened out, there may be an adjustment saying we have to, true up what that number is, and it may be material. We don't know. So it sits there as a potential, it's likely that you own more than you have reported, but not, I can't promise anything just because of the condition of the records. So that was one thing. And then, as Christy mentioned, we talked about the financial statements. The accounting system that was in place, even when we arrived as your auditors, was unduly complicated. And I like to describe it as white noise. The transactions were being recorded, but there was all this white noise, which made it very, very difficult for anybody to really reconcile this information, made it so you could get to the answer, but it just took undue effort to get to the answer when it should be very simple. And so our recommendation to collapse it into, you really only need one fund. There's no requirement that to have multiple funds, and collapse it and run it as it truly should take care of some of these comments, which are related to things like you're not using the accounts payable system. You're using Excel spreadsheets to try to track certain things, where if you could get the accounting system to do the heavy lifting for you, that will free up staff to do more financial analysis for you, which is what you're doing. And that is meat and potatoes. The other document you got, which is called a required communications letter, that's our letter to you. I like to call it a love letter to you, reminding you that we are aware that we work for you as the board. And this tells you kind of the promises you made to us in the engagement, the promises we made to you. And then the back of it is the representations that the management made to us during the audit process, so that you're fully apprised of how it went. And with that, many thanks to your team. It was brutal on them this year. I know that they were like really tired of seeing us, and it took a labor of love to get through this process, but they worked really hard. They were very helpful with us in terms of doing it, making their yeoman's effort to get to the bottom of stuff that happened long before they came here. So with that, I'll entertain questions. Sir.
Just a quick question, maybe this is for Kevin. I noticed here that there's about $400,000 that we're likely not to report. Following adjustments, it's on page 30. Just caught my eye. Like itself. I'm not a financial expert, I'm an engineer. 400,000 sounds like a lot of money.
Looks 13.
Communications.
Oh. The capital contributions that were understated, and then the miscellaneous expenses. So if you're talking about, and you add it all up.
When you add it all up, it comes to $204,000. Is that out of more? Is that within some
No.
kind of a acceptable level of?
It was within what we call our tolerable movement. And again, we're auditing to material degree. 194,000 was related to cleanup. Things that we knew coming in. Remember, we talked about the accounting system last year, we knew some of this stuff was. So as Christy and her team started digging through some of that 194, which is yeoman's share is that. The 42,000, remember I was telling you that I have this Excel schedule of what's due from other governments. When it reconciles back to what's in the general ledger, there's a $42,000 difference. It's not material, and it's almost the opposite of what it was last year, right?
Last year was 70,000.
Okay, and so you're looking at the direction, right? Right, so it's kind of moving back and forth, and that goes back to that whole, that Excel, if you're gonna use something, a manual system, then you have to reconcile it back to the general ledger. Your new staff will be doing that.
So it would be fair to assume that the next audit will show a smaller number.
We would hope it's gonna be much smaller.
A lot of that problem comes from the white noise that's in there. You could figure out what that 42,000 is, given it enough time. But given the time limitations of the audit, which even then,
Okay.
here we are in
Thank
April.
you.
That's almost virtually all of what that is that accounting records cleanup.
Okay,
that
thank
we're
you.
looking for.
Yeah, I've got one back to the financial statements, the main report on page 11.
Uh-huh.
maybe a good explanation for it, but I couldn't resolve it. Down under operating expenses. We got uncollectible capital contributions. 2021 is $20,000, $20,392. In 2020 is $168,867. Then you got a change of 0%. Is that a typo or is there more going on than I understand?
That is a typo.
Should be around 88%.
And that's a move in the right direction, I think.
He doesn't have cable. I'll give you my Netflix account.
CNN Plus.
Oh, wait, no, I won't. Just track it down.
No, that is a typo.
Thank goodness.
Anything else?
Don, you've worked pretty hard on this, haven't you? You've been working pretty hard on this. Where do we stand on getting so that the next report is clean, like we have our accounting system set up?
We don't have an accounting system set up, and that's what, it's been slow because they've been working on trying to get up to September 31st. We have to come up with a recommendation. Christie's working on this, a recommendation for an accounting system. We've had demonstrations from several people. I'm kind of leaning towards a selection, but we still got to bring that down, and then that'll start the clock of having to bring that up to speed. So, you know, we're having to pick a starting point and then start doing it correctly. But we're just still trying to clean up the mess that we found.
It's really top priority for us. What we have now, it's seen better days.
It's a mess, huh?
Yeah.
Well, and our recommendation to Christie, when she brought forward Mr. Mount's concerns to us is, you're going to be given that option when, if you move to a new software that says, do you want us to import all of your prior historical information? And the answer should be a whole hard no. Hard pass. Let that, you know, you have the records you need that you're required to keep by Florida law. But like again, all that white noise that's within the prior system is just not going to help you go forward.
Well, I appreciate you. And is there anything you need from us as a board?
Not yet.
As auditors, do you have a system that you recommend?
We've talked about that with Christie. You know, we've got several options. The upgraded version of what you currently have isn't awful, but it's one of those things where you had such kind of a bad taste in your mouth that we're not going to sit there and.
You should not be in sales.
So, but there are several, we talked to Christie about it. You know, they've thrown out some options, we've thrown out some options.
Trust you guys will listen to it.
My understanding is that I was in your office in Merritt Island. They said they use Sage 300.
Mhm.
And I use in my business Sage 100 and I have no problems.
Mhm.
But it's a system that has an audit trail in it. And right now the system we have, there's no audit trail, and that's where you're running into problems. You can't even trace how to get from how they got here from there.
Yeah, but that, I think that has, you know, just what we see is that's because the system's not being used as it was
Correct.
intended.
Correct.
Had it been used properly, it would have had an audit trail. However, I think that your system, like again, you have such a bad taste in your mouth right now. I'm not gonna sit here and I'm gonna say upgrade Sage and it'll be fine. Because it's really all gonna depend on how it's set up, because it becomes that old rule, garbage in, garbage out. There are some other systems out there that will facilitate the project tracking for you that may be more beneficial to you simply from a management standpoint. And that's what we've been working with Christie to kind of provide her insight into.
I think, I mean, a lot of it was, I don't think they ever got training, so they had no idea how to operate.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be crucial when we decide on a new system, that we invest in training the personnel.
Right.
So that they know how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the reasoning behind setting up multiple funds still is kind of we've never really gotten a straight answer on that. Other than we had your team reach out to the bank and say, Is there a reason? Are you requiring this? Because that's what we were told at one point, and we were told no. So the multiple funds is a problem, and then it was complete misuse of the pooled cash concept between those multiple funds that really just kind of took you down the rabbit hole.
Anything else? Now we'll move on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought everybody was here for me. I was on.
I don't, we may need a motion to accept the audit report and findings.
Also,
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, now, ongoing discussion, Dr. Flynn's agreement, is that something we need to postpone?
I think we need to discuss it. The chairman asked me to bring this up again, even though we don't have the official documentation or official guidance from the FAA, but their verbal discussions with me are, they're going to consider a non-aeronautical agreement. They're non-aeronautical agreements, you cannot waive CAM or wing fees. And I'll probably ask Adam to chime in a little bit here.
If you don't mind, I'll jump in there. So one of the grant assurances that we have is economic non-discrimination, and that's interpreted a number of different ways. And one of the major distinctions that exists in that analysis at the FAA level is between aeronautical and non-aeronautical agreements. Aeronautical agreements have a different framework of what you can consider in reaching agreements, like lease agreements, like an aeronautical lease and development agreement. And there's a lot broader spectrum of things you can consider when making exceptions, individual exceptions for aeronautical tenants. For example, public interest is something that is by FAA regulation or interpretation, something that can be considered for aeronautical leases. So we may say, all right, here's an entity that wants to lease aeronautical space. It's a good public interest group. Let's say it's something that is good for the community or it's going to attract business. And those things can be considered. The spectrum on the flip side of things that can be considered in non-aeronautical leases is far more limited, and in some cases non-existent for things that you might consider or the FAA would approve consideration of in an aeronautical lease. One of the things working strongly against us as far as Dr. Flynn's agreement is the FAA's at least preliminary finding and talking with Kevin that it's a non-aeronautical lease, which I think is correct. And then the second component that makes this a difficult discussion for the board is that it's already signed. And in the FAA's mind, it's signed, and that means the money that's due under that lease agreement is our money. And so when we're looking as a post-execution of agreement matter to change what we are entitled to, the FAA looks at that to some degree or another as giving up money that we're due.
Revenue diversion.
Not even just that, but and that's part of the issue. But and so here, when they do that, when the FAA does its AIP fund grants each year, they look at it and they say, okay, health of the airport, and you look at a million different things. And one of the things that's a big no-no is turning away free money that the airport is due, no matter how large and how small, because in their mind, they're going, well, we're giving you money year over year for operations and for airport development as a separate issue, mostly for operations. And you're giving up money that you're entitled to. Maybe you don't need so much money from us. And the airport can claw back 7 years if you get to a revenue diversion issue. I'm not saying they wouldn't, I'm just saying the teeth there are sharp. And so here, while the board has asked us to see what you do about considering production can wing fees for Dr. Flynn, and I certainly understand the practical arguments. Extreme concerns about our ability to do that without running afoul of the FAA, and some of the offline conversations that Kevin has had, acknowledging they haven't come down yet, have sort of led down that path a little bit to say you all are entitled. So, hindsight being what it is, perhaps this was something at the outset that we might have been able to do something about, but once it's signed and we have the right to collect those funds, it looks a little bit different to the FAA as an option. So,
And that all sounds fair and reasonable to me. However, if I remember correctly, we were going through the items that were being charged, it was questionable. It wasn't a set amount. And so we had some things that maybe shouldn't have been in there, is what I remember. And so we haven't gotten to a fair and reasonable dollar that we can agree on that.
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. The bigger issue for the FAA is not necessarily what was included in those figures, but that it was agreed, right? So it's signed.
But it was it wasn't a dollar amount, it wasn't like, all right, at the end of the year, it's gonna be 3,000, 10,000, whatever, it wasn't established, it was the figure wasn't established, was it, in the lease?
I believe it will. If it wasn't originally, I believe it is. I think they're fixed numbers for.
I think it's a
It's
A
based
number
off
and
of actual costs incurred. So it's the expenses that are incurred throughout the year that is agreed upon for those fees. And
Who
once.
agreed on
So
them? Is it in the lease?
It's in the lease, yes, sir.
The items.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Where did the costs come from?
The costs come from maintenance of the building, cleaning,
pest control.
pest control, the property insurance. We have to pay on the building is split between the tenants as well as us.
Did you split it up based on square footage or,
Yes, sir.
and are all the other leases equal to his? I mean, all the other leases written here have
Yes, sir.
exactly the same verbiage? Yeah.
That I've seen.
Based on square footage, yes. And it's a different conversation if we're talking about revamping it going forward. Say, once the lease expires, we can look at it and say, look, we want to do this completely differently. We've already talked about offline, getting rid of these CAM and wing fees and having maybe a CAM, but then including wing fees in the lease rate, right? So we don't have this kind of ongoing issues. But those are things that are more easily negotiated when there's no existing written lease agreement. And that's really kind of where we're hitting the wall as far as this goes. Again, because the way the FAA looks at it is they're in the lease agreement. It's money you're giving up.
That lease agreement has expired, we've been extending it, have we not? So this is
I
resolved.
thought there was a waiver that was agreed to, maybe
Abatement. There was an abatement of the fees that I think the board has put in place that's been extended by the month, but I don't believe that the term has expired, and I don't believe we extended the term to my knowledge.
So do we have a dollar value on?
that gross number.
Yeah.
We think it's gonna be $20 a square foot. However, we're, like everything now, we're in the queue waiting on an appraiser.
You're talking about for a new lease.
No, just-
He's asking about what is the debt that's owed.
If we did what the FAA would want us to do, what would be the dollar, year over year dollar value of that? Do we know?
Exactly, we want to say. $3,000 or $5,000, that's the.
3 to 5 a year.
Based on him sharing the lead.
Right, the square footage.
It's a recoup of out of pockets and for cans where tear cans. So they're not nebulous numbers. They're not designed to allow us to collect and earn money off of it. They're designed to pay expenses, right? So
Cost recovery.
And there's no recognition of usage. He's not here every day.
no, because the space is exclusive, right? So we can't lease to them 1 or 2 days at a time. Right.
What was the invoice amount that you sent out?
$3,600.
Have you talked about it?
I have not, I've reached out to him a couple of times, we've not connected, because he's not there every day,
He answers his cell phone.
When does his lease expire?
I don't.
Hey,
know.
Don? Don?
John, yes,
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so just for everyone's kind of refresher, we did this and we entered into this agreement suspending some of the fees. It was supposed to be for 1 year. That 1 year expired, I believe, last summer. And we were or it might have been last spring. And it kind of got morphed into the whole, as the last leadership left and Kevin came on, this was kind of dangling out there and wasn't really addressed because it hadn't been addressed by the previous leadership when it should have been at the end of the 1 year when it was then supposed to revert to Because the whole discussion was, hey, I don't know, you know, I just need a year to get started and then I'll be able to pay the full freight. And that was okay, we'll do that. Looking back on it, we probably shouldn't have done that. But we were trying to be nice and we were trying to, you know, utilize the space the best we could. So that's where the you know, is the lease over? Technically, the lease itself is not, but the abatement should have ended 1 year from the time that he signed it. And that was definitely in there. You can go back in the minutes. I've gone back and looked at it. It was definitely agreed to by all parties. I don't have the lease in front of me if it said 1 year or not. I think it does. And that was why Kevin then assessed the fees going forward after that 1 year had ended. So it wasn't like it was just sprung on anybody. It was part of the original agreement that we had. And, you know, bottom line is he's a for-profit business renting his space. Doesn't matter how much profit he's making, he is making profit. And that's up to him how much he charges and how much profit he wants to make. And that's, you know, I mean, how business obviously works. But, you know, I think we're trying to figure out whether or not the lease is over. The agreement for the abatement was definitely over after 1 year, and we never extended it. It was kind of just lost in that transition. So that's kind of where some of the background is for those of the board members that were not on the board when that agreement went into effect.
I think part of why they, I'm guessing here, but part of why they leased it to him was because it sits there, so there was zero income coming in. So the value, you know, you might get an audit that says $20 a square foot, but if you can't lease it and it's sitting there often, is that a smart business move? I mean, I think that's why they may have done what they did. But
Yes. Another thought. We're heading dangerously close to a request to abate amounts due, regardless of what they are, because the tenant is not having as much success as he might like with business. For clarity, we can't be. We are not a joint venture with any of our tenants. Our right to collect what we're due under the lease agreement cannot be based upon the economic success of the tenant itself. And I know that's not exactly what we're talking about here, but just again, when we're talking that the request was made as a result of Dr. Fleming's not making as much as he thought he might make. Again, I realize it's only a component. To me, that is not even a basis for consideration for reduction of what we're due under the lease agreement. We're heading down a slippery slope.
how long is it?
3 years.
3 years. So we knew this going into it, and that was the rate that we agreed to. And so, I mean, we could have had tenants that were paying $50 a square foot, and he would have whatever his rate is every year. That's part of the contractual agreement.
It would be the same for any tenant because of this, right? It's proportionate to the space.
So
I think, you know, I was here when that agreement was made. And we were totally devoid of any leases here. And we said, you might as well be in there because nobody's there. And we were very unclear about what this invoice was going to look like when it showed up. And it surprised Dr. Clint because he had no idea that it was going to be this much money. When we made the deal, we did clarify and say, you're going to be owing us $3,600. How much is it?
It's $3,300.
$3,300. You're going to owe us $3,300. And I think that surprised him. And I don't think he felt like it was going to be that much. I thought he was going to, well, let's say, I don't know what he thought, I don't know his mind, but I think it's going to be $500, something like that. Well, it turned out to be $3,300. I'd like to say secondly that I guess sometimes disagree with the interpretation of what's aeronautical and non-aeronautical, because he does one thing, aeronautical, flight physicals. And so I can't understand why they say that's not aeronautical, but I guess we don't get to make their decisions. But
I wish.
But my point is there any way we can talk to him and say it's aeronautical or non-aeronautical? We believe it's aeronautical because that's all he does. He doesn't do train engine certifications or anything. He does aeronautical certifications.
I brought that up And what I was told is he can provide that same services out in town in a strip mall versus an airport. So I don't think we're gonna have a lot of leeway there. And just like, Adam alluded to, I'm worried we are going down a dangerous slope, and something like this could put us into non-compliance. They could yank our grant funding away from us. I've worked at an airport where we were not compliant for lease agreements. It took us 5 years to get our grant money back. It's not good.
I wasn't here when you guys did it, but I think, it was in good faith. But I think the doctor needs, I don't know, I think he needs to just be told, hey, it was in good faith, it was wrong. The government says this is the way it has to be, and we can't. Put at risk the entire grant process for the airport, and it's just a tough pill to swallow, but.
And I'm happy to sit down with them and connect with them and talk to them about it and make a decision.
It would seem in the future that we should, if I go into a closing for a house, I get a good faith estimate, I get a disclosure of what this is. We didn't disclose those costs, I don't know. Because they had no idea what it was gonna be.
Well, just address that question, right? Excuse me. The amounts, the dollar values are in the lease agreement. They were our calculations. I don't know without the tenant asking, hey, why are these numbers what they are? We certainly would have done that. So I don't know that I agree necessarily with
Okay, so my understanding is that that was a surprise to me, right? And so they were in the lease or they weren't. That's what,
They are.
They're in there.
by number.
so you could calculate it out from the lease.
Oh, no, the actual number was confirmed.
Right.
No, the monthly cost on both CAM and wing fees.
Based on the invoices at the end of the fiscal year.
Well, that's the
Not
true up,
actually.
right?
Yeah.
That's the
True
true up,
Right.
right? That's different.
But there is a number in there.
Yes, there is a number, and in fact, he had a credit amount already applied, which was almost $1,000.
But we're asking, I think, in his lease, when he looks at his lease, you hereby rent this property and you will pay $750 in wing fees and $2,300 in CAM fees. Did it say that specifically?
Yes. But it's a true up, right? Because that's the whole point. We're not making money on that money. We're just making sure that it covers our expense. So it's pluses and minuses. If it had been too much, he gets a credit toward rent. If it's not enough, sounds like that's the case, then that's where that came from. So your point is well taken. And I think the answer is there would have been no way to predict this. That's why we do this true up. This is how they all go. Commercial leases is how they all go. Right? It's a recoupment of expense.
But he probably went into it with the abatement, so, probably didn't know those numbers, even though they were in the lease agreement.
Right, misunderstanding on his part, maybe, or miscommunication on our part.
Yeah.
Or both.
Uh,
We got
hey, Don,
one that read that space, right? I mean, you got
Don?
plenty of people.
Yes, John.
Hey, just to, so yeah, the numbers are in the lease, and to circle back, the reason why he asked for the abatement was because he knew what those numbers were, and he knew that he couldn't afford it the first year as he built the business up. That was, I mean, the discussion was exactly that. So he knew what the numbers were, and that was the reason why he asked for the abatement. I mean, that's kind of how it works. So, and again, bad on us, we didn't enforce it after the 1 year, and we kind of let it roll for 6 months, and then, but we're at where we're at, and we just gotta kind of make it right, so.
I certainly don't want to impact any of our grant funds. And if it's gonna do that, then it seems like we're kind of in a box, even though I think we led him to believe that we wanted him here to help. And it was, we positioned it as, you're only gonna do aeronautical, you're only gonna help pilots, you should be here. And I selfishly, as a pilot, like to be able to walk in right here and get my physical. And I would think that other pilots would like that too. And that's how we got here. Now we gotta clean it up. And if it means that we just have to tell them to pay up, but I don't know what else we can do. So, what's our action plan today?
Well, I think we got to make a decision on it, and it sounds like if all this is is the case, then I don't see how we can get away from not charging. I mean, that was, if that's what the agreement was, and the dollar values were stipulated, I mean, disclosed, that's what I didn't think that it was disclosed, so I didn't understand the nuance in there, which was why I was.
So we need to enforce the lease or come back with a lease termination.
I make a motion that we either enforce the lease or come back with a lease termination.
Okay, and do we have a second? Any discussion? I kind of have a question. Why would the termination, because he decides he wants to terminate the lease?
Yes.
And are we not penalize him because he's got another year and a half to go? That, I mean, generally when you terminate.
Release them.
Yeah.
Release them the obligation and
If
say.
we release him of the obligation, are we? Because we're entitled to this money, are we gonna, we're gonna run into the same,
Can we?
we're gonna run into the same problem?
I would have,
Yeah.
I would run that by Bill. You may have.
You're right, because if we say, get out, then he's like, we
You have the right.
Good, the right.
That's right.
So we'll see.
Why don't we postpone it? All right, because I think we need to find out the answer to that, because if the answer is we can't, then the board really needs to just have a motion to deny Dr. Flynn's request to waive these fees. That's really the only option. If there is an option for termination, then that's, I think the board should consider that as well. In fact, if you want to do those piecemeal from the weekend too, you can have a motion today to deny Dr. Flynn's request, and then, because we got to collect what's due under the lease at this point anyway, and then we can investigate whether the FA will approve.
Because you would need to pay up to
Yes,
the current,
that's correct.
bring the rent current.
Correct.
So then we would need a motion to deny Dr. Flynn's request for.
Do we have a motion on the floor that needs to be withdrawn?
I withdraw that motion, and I make a motion that we deny his request
For relief
for relief on that lease.
obligation.
Obligation.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Jessica, all right. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Crappy situation.
It is.
So in the future, I would recommend that we have a fixed price.
Oh,
And
okay.
to-
Yeah. We'd like to see these cam and win fees.
Add 'em
go
in.
away.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe get an answer on aeronautical versus non. I mean, that is a unique one.
It is.
Common sense would think it is.
It's going to be largely not.
But
Based
it's
on
good,
location.
I mean, it's a good, it's a point. He could have
Done it like
done
other,
anywhere.
every other
Every other,
pyramid is
so,
But he will.
off airport, right?
but I think we wanted him here. You know, we thought, oh, that'd be great, and we're not, we got nobody in this place.
Yeah.
Somebody better than us.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, and that brings us to attorney's report.
Great. At least as far as the identified item, I still have heard nothing from, despite the final hearing that occurred in January from the Division of Ethics, State of Florida. So the board could vote to postpone that yet again. I don't control what they do. They didn't even recognize us as a interested party the last time I had a conversation with them, but I'd like to try to get to the final decision on that. I have nothing for you today, though. So if I get a motion to postpone that issue.
Mark,
Second.
Jessica, all right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Welsh construction litigation matter is set to go to trial time certain for 2 weeks, beginning June 13th. Track between here and there is fairly well set. We have our final round of discovery being completed now with document production and depositions looking to be completed by mid-May. And at that point, we'll be moving forward to trial on that issue. So if anybody has any specific questions on that, happy to answer them, but that's where they're going for resolution.
Attorney's fees and costs to the winning party.
Probably not.
Pro bono.
When you deal with attorney fee and cost provisions in contracts, and again, that wasn't all this contract, but it's always a double-edged sword. So there is a loose claim by the plaintiff for attorney fees and costs. I don't think it really is applicable. It kind of implicates the indemnification provisions of the contract documents. I don't think it applies. So it's both sides, I think it's gonna be a tall order. So I would say probably not. Which the case was settled.
Very briefly, what's the issue with Welsh? What happened?
So it was part of the COI runway improvement and extension project, which I think began in 2014. I forget when the RFP was issued. Wells Construction was the winning bidder. There's a lot of facts in this case.
That's good enough.
Well, there were some issues with the project. There was a fairly large line item that was removed as a result of a change in decision by the St. Johns River Water Management District that will be required for permitting. And that resulted in a $500 some odd thousand reduction or $600 some odd thousand reduction in the contract and contract price. And there's a dispute over whether the reduction or elimination of that item encompassed as much of those funds as we believe it did. There were also a couple of issues with hidden or unforeseen conditions, at least as part of the plaintiff has alleged. And also we had liquidated damages issue with delays at the end of the project, which I actually think was resolved after the project. But those are the three kind of major issues. Brad, if you have any questions specifically that we haven't talked about.
I just wanted in general, I didn't notice those periods.
Yeah, no problem. How much time to get?
Still?
For me it is. How about you?
He's pulling typos out of the audit report. Yeah, that's got a lot of time.
I was trying to think of it. So anyway, that,
Can we do a beer?
yeah, for sure. But so that will be moving forward to trial in June.
All right. And that's it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other questions? Authority member reports. Roger?
I don't know.
Yes. Brad?
Well, I had the pleasure of sitting in on a couple of selection committee meetings, and it was a world of information and knowledge gained by observing what happened there. I was impressed with all of the 5 candidates that were involved. But the thing that perhaps impressed me the most was this morning Zooming and realizing just how bad our AV really is, because it is as bad can get. And if there's a priority to something we need to address, we really, and it really, so there were just cutouts. There would be times where it was blacked out for minutes at a time.
It was miserable in here.
It was
too,
horrible.
trust me.
And I've heard people say that we're listening to Zooms. Would you guys speak up? We can't hear you. And I couldn't hear until I got my earphones out on my computer, and then it was still quite hard, and I had to really listen. So between the cameras and the audio, we need to address it. I don't know what the problem is.
And what is our plan to resolve it?
Well, today we swapped out the computers in here. That was a lot of our issue, but we definitely need a technology upgrade in this room. But we don't have a lot of internet here.
There's no bandwidth that comes out here. It's very limited.
No way to get it here.
Darling.
No, Starlink, I applied for it. My shop's right over here.
I've got one.
Where?
I've got an extra service. I'll be happy to sell it.
Oh, my goodness.
I was going like there was no coverage.
No, it's. I had, we'll talk, we'll take this one. I'm gonna start sitting in a box.
Jason, that bandwidth came up as one of the times it was broken down. It came up with a warning, said limited bandwidth.
Yeah, we kept losing it. It's very limited out here. This area of Titusville, once you leave US 1, it's tough.
But I think our main issue was that computer this morning. That was part of it.
The other thing, if I could jump on that is, I haven't checked in a while, but a lot of most municipalities post rather quickly a link to watch the video of the board meeting things, and I don't see that anywhere on the website. I don't know if it's changed since the last one, but I have a specific.
Yeah, it's there.
It's there now. Typically, how long does it take to get up for an archive board meeting? I mean, I'm not talking about like watch Zoom. I'm talking about, I've had it where I want to go back and watch an archived board meeting, and I have to call you guys and ask for a link, and I think the public should be able to access the board meeting.
Yeah, we should make it available by that next day.
I don't know how you have to do it, but every municipality I know does it. You log in.
It's easy.
Yeah.
We have the head of our IT division on there.
Okay.
Kevin, I guess.
We talked about moving our boardroom. Is that still talked about or?
No, I think we're staying right here, but we need to make it better. We need to bring technology in here better. We looked at some different layouts, but it's gonna be expensive to do that. But I think we need to figure out a better solution for what we have right now. That's.
Yes. All right. So I don't really have anything else to add. So is there any cards?
Okay, Kevin Panic, Titusville, Florida, 623 Oakwood Place. I'll be brief. Broward County gives you 3 minutes. I'll just take one. My dad tells me I should listen more and speak less. So observation. This board has really gotten in an amazing stride. I've been coming to board meetings for a couple of years now. The courtesy that is shown and the listening and thoughtfulness and a details man after my own heart. Just a great mix we have here. And also the decision they made to get the CEO of Kevin, you hit it out of the park, okay? It's amazing. That's a comment. And then a suggestion, 2 suggestions. Sometimes in government, I've noticed that people kind of, the way you guys have given such wonderful, thoughtful consideration of this naming thing. And the Fly Space Coast, coupled with that, and I know you haven't asked for, public's comment on this, but that Enterprise Spaceport or what it was. Yeah, you hit it out of the park, okay? You're out of the park. So rather than, my suggestion would be that, rather than go to EDC and keep, sometimes in government, you guys are hitting a stride that in Broward County, it's amazing that this government body is working so well. Just go take it to them. Don't tell them anything else. Suggestions, say, look, this is what we're gonna do. You got any hiccups, we want you to brand with us and move out. This is a suggestion on that. And then on signage, at Arthur Dunn on Garden Street. Now, if I had my way, I'd chainsaw every single billboard in America. Okay, but I can't do that. But there's a billboard there that's a Lennar or whatever that's right by the road. And that thing would be gorgeous. You guys get a 400-year lease on it. And I don't like billboards, but it's right where you need to be to see that's our. Anything else you guys are putting close to the airport, you don't see it. You got one green airport sign. Drive by there sometime. You get that billboard, you secure that billboard, a long-term 50-year lease. I suggest it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think Don White wanted to talk about Young Eagles.
Don, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
With EA 724, I just want to let you know that we are having our annual, I say 3 times a year, Young Eagles Day this Saturday on the 23rd. We've got 105 kids registered. We've got 9 or 10 planes signed up and about another 20 volunteers helping us out, including the Wings of Grace kids down in Melbourne and the CIP cadets up in Titusville. So it is a very much a community project and service, and to get these young kids some experience in the aviation. So I just want to let you know that that's happening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Don.
Right. With that, I guess we'll adjourn. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Certainly.
Well, that's,